We got our co-host Dustin,
What's up?
and our guest is the other co-owner for Great Kills, Matt.
Hey,
Um, I do want to start off by asking Matt, and I guess Dustin too, uh, what is the general atmosphere in Great Kills, and how are you guys feeling right now, week 13?
I think good, about as good as you can. Still a lot of season or left to be played, or I guess the playoffs, but feel pretty good. It's been a bit of a weird season,
Yeah, yeah,
but no, I think from start all the way draft prep through now, um, at least I've been pretty pleased with the process we've had. And there are certain things that are always like out of our control, but I think we've process wise it's been a solid year, and we've been fortunate to dodge major injuries. I know a lot of teams haven't been so fortunate, so I mean there's a big element of luck to it, but
No
I
element of
think
luck.
where we stand
No element of luck. Standard is the standard.
now.
Excuses are excuses.
God damn it, Dustin.
No, yeah, no. Spot on. It's we've been saying it all year, or every time we talk about it, we say the same thing. But the HFFL is so competitive now. There really are no teams that don't know what they're doing or aren't invested. To the extent that maybe a long time there were. So every year it's such a grind to get to this position. So yeah, we're considering ourselves very fortunate to be in this spot. And I think playoffs did get a little bit more interesting with some recent developments. So it should be pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that, and I think I would classify you guys as the favorite for now, though, because it feels like this changes every week, and
Yeah,
it's even though it's week 13 and playoffs is right around the corner, you don't know what's gonna happen, right? That's my favorite phrase. Anything can happen. So hopefully you guys hold on to it and can finish strong here, but
I would say
really good.
despite like the craziness in the league and the NFL and outside this year, it feels like this year's been less of a scramble for us. I feel like last year we were always just trying to like keep up and make moves to put ourselves in better position.
Hmm.
And this year it felt like we had the luxury of some good depth, startable depth as well as like upside on our bench pretty much throughout, and it gave us the flexibility to you know make moves for guys like James Robinson before the season started, before he broke out. Miles Gaskin, when other people were chasing the Malcolm Browns and the Naheem Hineses
Hmm.
in the early weeks, and I think that really benefited us, middle of the season and then towards the trade deadline, um, with some additional flexibility. But it just feels like it's been less of a scramble and not playing catch up as much as it felt
Yeah.
like we were at some
I just
points
want to
last
I
year.
just want to add, yeah, somebody drafts Ezekiel Elliott for $104, and he has the season that he's had so far, which has been pretty bad since Dak Prescott has gone down, and we're still in the mix. That has to be attributed to how much depth we were able to get. James Robinson, like you said, Miles Gaskin was big for us in the middle weeks, and just we had a lot of wide receiver depth too. So yeah, I think Matt's spot on. Like we would have been scrambling pretty hard with what happened to Zeke if it weren't for that. But luckily, I think we did run into some really good moves early on in the season that gave us a pretty stable base to play from.
I will
Yeah,
say Dustin was really pro James Robinson sort of pre-week one when we made that ad, and we were like going back and forth all about Daryl Williams as like ahead
Yeah,
of
yeah,
CEH, and Dustin was like
yeah,
really adamant about James
yeah.
Robinson. So give him
Because
props
yeah,
there.
we,
It
we
worked
we
out.
we ended up bidding like 9 on Daryl Williams anyway, but Matt was like feeling like, oh, we would feel a lot safer with Daryl Williams because we had CEH and we didn't know what he was going to be. But I was a little bit more like, if James Robinson turns out to be anything, that could be so big for our team that you know I, I don't. I'm not sure if I value it the same way that maybe we were talking about. And I had no idea James Robinson would be the player that he's been, but
of course, no one did.
yeah, he's been a big part of our season. So we consider ourselves very lucky to have run into that.
One thing that I think shouldn't be overstated is we talked a lot about the trades that happened at the deadline, but I think you guys had one of the best trades in terms of changing your keepers. Um, into some of these QBs that you got now, Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. And I think it might go overlooked, maybe not. I don't know. Probably some people are saying, yeah, of course, this is how Great Kills does their business. But really, I think of all the teams that made the buying moves, you guys were one of the best, or if not the best.
Yeah, I mean, we were running through a lot of potential angles, and kind of all season long, as solid as Big Ben and Matt Ryan are, most weeks they have their down weeks. It just felt like that was one of the big areas, other than tight end, where we could really improve ourselves if we wanted to make a push at the deadline.
Yeah.
And we ran through, possibilities of those two, maybe those two, and then flipping Rodgers for something else. And then I think the more we thought about it, and just kind of how things played out anyways, but the more we thought about it, thought of having Rodgers and Russ and just holding on to both, if we could get them, just started to seem pretty appealing in terms of, really plug and play at quarterback and trying to give ourselves an advantage at quarterback, against most teams. Whereas, for most of the season, I'd say we were kind of average to maybe slightly above average.
Right.
With Ryan and Big Ben.
And the player that you lost, the key player that you lost was Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and he's not going to be that useful, I think, in the next couple weeks. So brilliant move, I think, in terms of the keepers that you kept, the keepers that you moved. You did lose T. Higgins as well, and I wouldn't say that's brilliant in terms of you foresaw the future and saw Joe Burrow getting hurt. I mean, that's just something that happened, and as
or lucky.
exactly, that was super lucky. But the way that it shook out, you guys came out on top, huge, because T. Higgins and
right,
Clyde are
Rodgers
down, not that
Wilson
good
deal.
anymore. Yep.
Sorry, the Rodgers Wilson deal was really interesting for us because in the initial phases of that trade, we could not fit both Rodgers and Wilson just cap wise because the main piece we were giving back was Edwards-Helaire, and he was $20, so it was going to put us over. So we were exploring, like, can we flip Aaron Rodgers somewhere else, like, to get something a little bit cheaper but still helpful for our team? And we went through so many scenarios. I think that trade was being talked through for 2 or 3 weeks before we actually pulled the trigger.
Wow.
And we were trying to figure out, okay, like, we want. I mean, Russ was the main piece for in our mind, and Rodgers, we were like, we can't fit him without giving away something what we thought was important. So we were trying for a bunch of other, like, variations of trades that we thought could fit. And in the end, we ended up throwing Amari Cooper into that trade. To make the numbers balance, and I guess that turned out to be a really good move too, because that's when the Cowboys started going, like, even more up and down with their quarterback play and their wide receiver play as a result. So it really could have been a different trade than what we ended up making, but I do think out of the choices we had, we did end up making the best choice.
And during those few 2 to 3 weeks that we were talking about that deal, I mean, CEH's value was going all over the place with the Le'Veon Bell signing, and a couple weeks
and then he
of
had
not
a
too many
really good
touches, and
he
I
had a
really
really
started to
good
think we might have
yardage
missed our
game,
boat. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Oh no, I was just gonna say. Yeah, I was just gonna say. It seemed like at certain points that maybe we had missed the window on getting the return for CEH that we thought we might be able to, or that we were hoping to.
Yeah.
Just with all the news there, but worked out in the end.
And here's the worst part for everyone else who's listening in. The worst part for the rest of the league is that I still think you probably have the best keepers out of the playoff teams that are, like, already locked into the playoffs. The 3 teams. We don't know who the 4th team is yet. So out of those 3 teams, I think you still have Antonio Gibson. You still got James Robinson, who could be a keeper. You still have all these guys. I mean, even though you traded away your keepers to get the best values for this year, you still have the best keepers. Just incredible.
I don't know if we have the best, but I do really feel pretty good about our keepers. I think the best part of our situation going in was that I think we had a lot of, like, keepable guys. So that's why we were probably a little bit aggressive with, maybe giving up. Some teams might not have given up a CEH even if they were in our position, like, if the rest of their keepers didn't look so good, because CEH has been on the down a little bit in terms of usage and stuff, but long term he's a $20 player this year, and it looks like he'll have a pretty good role, like, going forward, and running backs are just so expensive that he's a keeper that maybe Oakland has Jonathan Taylor, and I don't know how far they got in discussions with Jonathan Taylor, but maybe they would have been less likely to pull the trigger on a Jonathan Taylor trade because they don't have a ton, behind him in terms of, keepable running backs. So
That's what I'm saying.
maybe that was probably the difference between, I think, Oakland's situation and our situation. We both had that like $18 to $20 rookie running back that,
Yeah.
hasn't lit it up, but also has like such a decent future role going forward that it'll have value in a keeper trade. But for us, we have a Antonio Gibson, we have a Kareem Hunt, we have a James Robinson. That's already 3 running backs that we, presumably would keep. So it was a lot easier for us to part with him. Whereas, I don't know exactly what talks Oakland might have even had, but for them, I'm sure it's a lot harder to be like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna trade Jonathan Taylor, and then look at it like his next year, keeper group. It's like not a lot of running backs, and running backs are such a scarce commodity that I think that was like our biggest advantage. I think in the trade deadline and the trade talks.
And I think it goes back to what we were talking about before about just the depth we came into the season with, or at least the depth we thought we had. Guys like Damian Harris deep on our bench that allowed us to throw in kind of cheap bids on guys like T. Higgins and Myles Gaskin that we could, felt comfortable with our keeper stock that we could make those moves at the deadline and still feel good about, seasons beyond this one. When money was being spent on, the Devontae Freemans and of the world early in the season, we were going cheaper, taking flyers on some guys that we thought, we could use either at the deadline or just improve our keeper stock.
Yeah, I like to that point. We were like a week early on a lot of like hot waiver pickups. Like, I remember like every week, like there's like an article or like fantasy analysis on like hot waiver pickups this week, and I would always be like, oh, the hottest like one is already on our roster. We got him last week before like it became big, and we were only able to do that because if you have depth early, it snowballs, whereas other teams like need to fill holes right away, but we're like, okay, we're pretty good for this week. Like, is there anything that could turn into something big next week? So that was our mentality for a lot of the waiver periods early. Like, like this guy isn't breaking out now, but we have roster spots to spare. So what's a guy that, like, I remember we would say, like, what's a guy you think could become big, like in the next couple of weeks? And then, we obviously got really lucky and hit on a couple of them. And I think that was really big in, turning our depth into, the strong team that we have at this point.
Yeah, not only is that depth, but it's also called avoiding injuries because certainly when you've got too many injuries, you're going to have to fill those holes. So I think that's a definitely great point. Something that I do as well in terms of analyzing what will be the next big waiver pickup. It's hard to predict it, but I like trying to do it, and it definitely is part of the fun. Yeah, for sure.
It feels so good when it comes through because you're
It
like,
is.
oh, I like basically it's like getting in early on a stock before it rises. You're just
exactly.
Like, oh man, like this. It feels honestly better than like a lot of different things about fantasy football. It's one of the things that I think make fantasy football so fun, like week to week.
I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but I do it a lot. I've done it in the past years where I just pick up the most random dudes and. Sometimes I'm pretty sure my hit rate is very low, but still, like it's just part of the fun that I have.
Sure. I think New England Kingfishers, that's their style for sure. And
yeah.
When it hits, it looks super great, and then obviously when it doesn't,
no one remembers it though. I just drop them.
No one's gonna remember the ones that are just one week flyers.
Yeah, who cares?
We went through a bunch of those too, but
right.
When it does hit and like late in the season, people are like, wait, how did this guy go for this amount? That you just got him like a week early, and that's honestly a big like skill, or it feels like it's like a skill factor when it hits through, because you're like, okay, like I didn't just luck into the a $10 bid on like this guy that was obvious. The week of, I got him the week before, which, shows a little bit of foresight, a little bit of prediction.
And, of course, a little bit of luck. But, yeah, I think you guys are having a great season. Hopefully it continues. And, you guys are only going to get this one episode to pump up the team before we talk good about your team again. So I'll let it slide for this episode. Let's go to the matchups from last week. So, It's been a long time since we've had the show, honestly. Like, we've skipped the Thanksgiving week, and then it feels like forever because there's been all of these news about COVID, and some people's teams have been wiped because of it, and then there's also the Will Fuller suspension and all these news going on. And juicy news, and when you guys were talking about the Clyde Edwards-Helaire trade, and possibly Taylor was in the mix at the deadline. Swift did move. He did move, and it was really unfortunate. I mean, I thought it was not the greatest move at the time, but still, he got someone of great skill, talent in return. But now that's all wiped away and was in fact dropped. And so those are the major storylines coming into this week. And I think as of now, we've got 3 playoff teams solidified already in Capital Region, Oakland, and Great Kills, and we're really waiting on the 4th team. It's either going to be Flushing or Virginia. Actually, before we go into the matchups, do you guys want to predict who you think between Virginia and Flushing are going to make it?
Interesting. Matt, what do you think?
I don't know.
If you don't want to answer that, you can also think about who would you least want to face in the playoffs. That's also acceptable here too.
For me, I have a definitive answer on who I think will win.
Okay.
Or will make the 4th spot.
Do it.
I think it's Virginia.
Ho-ho.
Derrick Henry. We got December Derrick Henry, which is a different beast. It's a different beast.
He's here.
I think we did discuss Derrick Henry trade and Dalvin Cook trade.
Oh, really? Oh, really?
Yeah. And I remember the thinking was that Derrick Henry is probably the bigger, more dangerous factor down the stretch in a playoff run.
Yep.
In terms of schedule too, I think Dalvin Cook's schedule is a little bit tougher than
Henry's
schedule. So I think that was a big reason why he was more. I don't know if he had a choice between Cook and Henry, or if the choice was Capital Regions to make. But either way, I remember discussing with Virginia, and the consensus between me and him were, he would rather hold Henry for the playoff run, and I would have rather gotten Henry if I was trading for either one of them, which eventually did not end up happening. But we're seeing it already. 39 points last week. I think this is the Tennessee Titans game plan. They do it kind of on a micro level within games where they unleash Derrick Henry late in a game to just run over tired players. But they're also doing it in a macro sense over the season where, they want him to be peaking in December, January, when it's cold, teams are injured, teams are tired, linebackers don't want to, aren't as fresh as they were earlier in the season. And I think we're just seeing them pivot to that game plan, because early in the season they were doing a lot of passing with Tannehill. There was a lot of, a little bit of different offensive style, it seemed, but I think that was just to keep Henry as fresh as possible, and we're seeing it now. And I think that just makes Virginia the favorite to make playoffs. And I honestly consider them a pretty strong contender. I've been saying it all year. He's gotten ridiculously wrecked by injuries, but he's made so many good moves all year that I think, he could be in really good position, especially if some of his guys come back like Swift or Galladay before, the playoffs start. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a lot of great points. Before you go, Matt, I'm going to put my vote on Flushing just so that you can break the tie. I don't want to. I'll leave you with the pressure, but I think Flushing will finish the job here and get the last playoff spot. I think there is a big difference in terms of what 1 week has made. When you look at Flushing, it is a little bit on the downward trend, but I still believe that Kyler and Deshaun Watson, they're going to carry this team. Terry McLaurin, he's so good. And then I think their best player is Keenan Allen, and he's going to be instrumental, especially with how Justin Herbert's just slinging the ball everywhere. Chris Carson's back now. Mixon, he'll be back later.
The Fuller suspension.
Oh yeah, the Fuller suspension, right? Brandon Cooks is now on the uprise as well. So I think there's a lot of things going in multiple directions. I think Kyler, he's got a little bit of an injury, but I think he's going to be fine in terms of defenses that are not the Patriots, who understand how to take away what you do best. And so, there are obviously still some holes, I think, in the lineup. Some flex players that maybe you can improve on a little bit, but I think they have the favorite in terms of the game lead. They do lose the tiebreaker, but I think they'll be able to to do this. It is a tough matchup, though. I think they face you, you guys, great kills in the last week. So tougher matchup, but I think they'll get it done.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say the answer would be a little self-serving, right? Because obviously I want to win this week, so hope that hope that we knock
True.
them out. But I was gonna make a lot of the same points you made about. I think you start with Kyler and Deshaun. I mean, that's a pretty scary duo and can carry you. And I think, like you said, Carson coming back,
Yeah.
Keenan Allen, Brandon Cook's stock is up. Terry McLaurin. I think there's a lot of good pieces here where it gets a little. I mean, the margin for error is just a lot more narrow. I think for Flushing, just because of the back end of the roster,
Yeah.
the flex spots as you talked about, and then the bench, as compared to Virginia, who Swift, if he gets healthy, Kenny Galladay, if he gets healthy, I think their roster can be bolstered a little if they get in. Whereas I think Flushing is working on a pretty um, pretty thin margin of just needing to stay healthy and needing to have their top few guys quarterbacks.
Yeah. The main
Keenan
point
Allen
is
carry them. So
Right.
yeah.
Right.
The main point is that at least Flushing, Virginia needs two things to happen
Yeah.
for them to make
Yep.
playoffs.
Yeah.
They need Flushing to lose, and they also need to beat Harlem, which I don't think is a gimme.
No.
So if you go by odds, I think it's pretty close. Probably Flushing might even have the slight advantage just because they only need one thing to happen, like one or the other. But if I'm talking about what team looks better on paper right now,
Sure.
I think it has to be Virginia.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, your points are pretty valid. That all they need is a win or a loss from Virginia, and that alone could make the difference.
Right. And it all comes down to this final week. And so it's going to be super interesting to see. And one of the Andrews, they're going to do it. I believe. Let's go to your guys' matchup versus Mars. And I think we've covered your team pretty well. I think we know the storylines. It's a lot of it is Gibson. I think Gibson is he destroys the Cowboys, and I think that's what he did on national TV. And so everyone's been talking about how amazing he is, and congratulations. But to move on to Mars, it's really the opposite story here with Derek Carr not doing so well and starting Kendall Hinton for negative points. I mean, I understand what he was trying to do. Just it's unfortunate in terms of the results, but I guess for Mars, they're probably tuned out. I don't think I've seen John on the Discord in a while. It's kind of just we're waiting, and I'm facing him this week. We're going to face each other again in week 14. It's just we're both hoping to end the season as fast as possible. Matt, your thoughts on Mars? Hello, Matt? You there?
Maybe he's gone. I'll just chime in.
Sorry,
with
no,
what
I'm sorry. I'm
Oh,
gonna
you
cut out
muted?
for a second. But,
Yeah, no worries.
yeah, no, it cut out for a second, but Dustin, you can go because I didn't hear what the question was. But yeah, I'm back now. Sorry about that.
So Mars, I think the Kendall Hinton play is pretty much indicative of their season all year. Just in terms of it seems like they're going for a lot of big brain plays, a lot of surprising, interesting trades. But I don't think they've all been misguided, but it just ends up blowing up in their face and looking really bad. And I think that's what happened with the Kendall Hinton play. It also happened with some of, I think, their trades earlier where, they're trying to go for something a little bit surprising or something crazy. And then it's not always because it's a bad decision, but it just has turned out to be, a bad decision in once you see the results. And I mean, they're just limping to the finish line now. I don't think there's much else to say. They're definitely going to finish probably, definitely finishing in the bottom two regular season record-wise, and we'll see if they can find some magic to get out of the bottom two spots. But they have to be considered one of the two worst teams right now. So I don't know. I'm more interested to see if they change their approach at all next year. This year was obviously a lost season pretty early on, but I don't know if he was able to develop any lessons or learn any lessons from this, and that would be what's important for me. I think a losing season isn't bad as long as you come away with things that you add to your process to make it better. But how confident are we that that kind of thing is going to happen here? I'm not sure, but I'll be really interested to see what they come out with next year.
Yeah, so Matt, I asked about what you thought about Mars's team and their season.
Yeah, I mean, not not much to add other than what Dustin said. I mean, you had Debo Samuel had a nice day on the bench.
He
I don't know
did.
if he had gotten benched for Kendall Hinton, but he's got
Uh,
3 more years of Debo Samuel, or 2 more years of Debo
Two
Samuel.
more
So
years, yeah.
2 more years, but um, I mean, yeah, I'm curious to kind of see the direction where John takes it next season because there's at least if you've been ravaged by injuries or have a rough year, try to salvage what you can to start setting yourself up for subsequent years. And he had CEH we got from us, so see what sort of develops in Kansas City. Still has Debo under contract, CD Lamb, who you know has looked good at times, looked really good at times, and so just kind of curious to see the direction he takes things. But I think, like Dustin said, there's not too much to talk about for this year because it's pretty much been a lost season from pretty early on.
yeah, it's pretty rough, and I
I
can
want to
kind
talk
of
about on a macro level though.
sympathize.
Like,
But yeah, go ahead.
sorry, maybe the league has kind of passed, Mars by. Like, I think
Ooh,
a lot of their
ooh.
strategies, it worked in the era where only a couple of teams were really like grinding out tape and like grinding out like spreadsheets and like really like trying hard to win every year. But I think his style is a little bit too loose. Like it relies a lot on stacks, which obviously can go really good or really bad. So he's been kind of swinging up and down like last couple of years. But I don't know if he has I think the league as a whole has gotten so much better, and I think as an owner or in terms of fantasy or football knowledge, I think he's either at or behind where he was, 6, 7, 8 years ago when he likes to always talk about how he was you know one of the top three, like and his record was deserving of that claim, but I don't know if he's the same fantasy owner relative to the rest of the league, and I don't think that's really him getting worse. Maybe I'm wondering if the league has just gotten so much better. It's just a different era.
Yeah, yeah. Here's what happened. It's called complacency. As you win, you win a lot, and he got his championship. You get third, and a majority of the league got you know they were on the other side. They were losing, and so they
Yeah,
had to
yeah.
figure out what was wrong, what their process had to be, how it had to change. And I think through that they've possibly been left behind. I do want to remind you that Mars was in the finals last year, so
Sure, sure.
we don't know if this is going to be a trend or not. It just could be that all of his moves didn't hit this year, and we're just talking about this 2020 case, but in any case, I think yeah, it there are some signs of complacency. I think, and losing isn't always bad. I think that's part of what it's part of life. First of all, you can't always win every single time, and I know people want to be on the side that's winning every single time, but it just isn't the case. And when you do lose, it's important to find out why you're losing and then
That's
try to get better. And even if you get better, you still can't win them all. So that's just how it is in this game, and it's rough, but that's just how it is. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say about Mars. I will say, oh yeah, so I will say that for the article this week, just a sneak preview, I'm going to be covering the contracts that are already locked in for each team. Just as I think something that I done last year and I will do again, just to take a look at an early look at what 2021 could be for most teams. And as I've been thinking about it myself, I know what it looked like for Great Kills. For Mars, I've been a little bit. How do I put this? Disappointed, maybe. Like their team is not the greatest, but yet they don't have too many assets going into next year either.
Yeah.
In my opinion, but that's always up for debate, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. I think there are certainly players, keepers that are the blue chips, and it feels to me like they've maybe have one, but that's about it, and then no other real assets outside
Yeah, I
of
mean,
that.
I'm gonna be honest. I think they have some negative assets on their roster. I
Sure.
mean, Debo does show out every now and then, but I still don't think he's worthy of that contract, even with the flashes that we've seen. Uh, we've said our piece on Mike Williams, which I maybe we're a little harsh on him, but
Yeah, we probably are.
Yeah, but I do think he is still that inconsistent guy that I don't think is a great value on, he's being kept at what, like 13 or 14 next year. I'm okay with it, honestly, but I don't think it was worth giving up a 2.1 or 2.2 or whatever that pick ends up being. And just his lack of picks plus, his keeper group where he has like maybe if you squint two pretty good ones and then like, a bunch of iffy ones. I just think he's from a season this bad, you hope to come away with more promising um, you know, more promising of a setup for next year. And I don't really think that, that's what they achieved.
Yeah, and maybe that changes over the last couple of weeks, but we'll have to see. Right now, it doesn't look too great. But let's move on to a team that has been on the upswing and I think has a lot of good pieces for next year, and that's LIC. And they got the victory over Harlem. And I think with Nick Chubb and Justin Jefferson, they are set up pretty well for next year. Of course, they have Aaron Jones. Of course, they have their QBs from before. Jared Goff is starting still, but with Tua coming in, he's going to be the future. I think 2021 is going to be looking pretty nice for LIC. You can go ahead, Dustin, and finish your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, LIC I think is the opposite of what
Yeah.
I was talking about with Mars. Like, they no, I don't want to say they knew, but like it seemed like a pretty lost season for them too, pretty early on. But they've made, I think, good moves. They didn't overextend. They didn't trade away, too much. They held on to Julio Jones and Robert Woods, just because I think the market wasn't really, great for what they were looking for. And they made sure to keep the pieces that they think are the future for next year. And getting a guy like Justin Jefferson, obviously, it makes their future look so bright. And yeah, if I have to think about like future, like next year, like who is more likely to be a threat, and I just have to think that LIC is just set up so much better. They are the one that acquired, Mars's second round pick, which they did wonders with the early second round pick this year. So it's dangerous in their hands. That's the big criticism. Like even if it's not dangerous in Mars's hands, they have to think about what it is in the hands of someone else then, right? And then giving it to someone that, has shown a lot of success with that for, not a blue chip keeper, I don't think. I think they did give it up for too little. But I mean, that's probably a big trade that I think could be impactful next year. And, we might see, Mars regret that pick a little bit more, I think, that trade a little bit more, I think, in the future.
Matt, you can take it in any direction you want about LIC.
No, I mean, maybe it's because Dustin and I talk so frequently about the league and the teams and stuff, but
Yeah.
I pretty much feel the same way. I mean, it's keepable running backs, especially elite keepable running backs. That's the biggest asset. I think in any leagues, and this league included, or especially this league. So to have Aaron Jones and Nick Chubb at the prices he has, I mean, that's always going to feel like you're set up, to go into the following season as one of the teams with the strongest keeper crops, and then you add into that Justin Jefferson, who I'm a huge fan of. Dustin and I actually own him in a dynasty league we're in. So
Oh, you co-own there too?
Sorry?
You co-own there
We
too?
co-own in a dynasty.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we're talking a lot about football. Maybe that's why we have a lot of the same opinions. But but no, I mean, I'm just a big fan. Big fan of the keeper crop, and like you said, you mentioned Tua already. So yeah, I think I honestly think this is a strong team. Down the stretch this season, obviously,
right now,
consolation perspective. But not only do they have those assets for next year, I think it's a strong team for the remainder of this year. Possibly come out strong in the consolation and set themselves up even better for next year.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's going to be a strong team, I think. Yeah, from here on out, and 2021, I'm definitely thinking about them as one of the contenders. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's like the major separator, I think, from LIC and their owner from a lot of other teams. When things don't start out well, they actually buckle down and grit their way to like a pretty decent finish, a pretty decent team. They've started, I think, 1-5, I think, the last 3 seasons. And the first season they rallied to win it all. Last year they went finished 5-8, which is a pretty good finish considering where they started,
Yep.
and got to second place in the consolation bracket. They possibly could have won it if things went right in the last couple of weeks. And then this year they look like they're on the same trajectory where they're going to finish probably 4 or 5-8 or something. And I have to consider them one of the favorites to make it to the consolation bracket. So I think it's like, obviously their highs are as good as anyone. They've won 3 championships, so it's obviously not just like, oh, they're a safe team. But I think the way they rally from bad positions is really the difference between I hate to keep comparing it, but like Mars or maybe some other teams that have some lower lows, I think, than LIC tends to have.
Sure, and I wonder if you're LIC, you got to be asking what's going on with the beginning of the season. I mean, maybe it's a bit of luck.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what it is, honestly, because I haven't looked at it closely, but
No, I
it
think
could
their
be
draft
luck.
is
It could
like
be, yeah, it could be the draft. I don't know. And if they fix that, then the rest of the league needs to be scared of what this team could do from the whole season perspective.
Right. I think their draft evaluations have been a little bit off coming into these seasons. Like they've made some picks and some like decisions in the draft that, usually I'm like, okay, like I like what this team has done in the draft, but even coming into the season, I thought like the Ingram was a bit of an overpay. Like that was probably, you're paying for what his peak was, and obviously we got something way lower than his peak. Paid a lot for Antonio Brown last year. I thought it wasn't enough of a discount on like what the shenanigans were preseason. There have been draft errors that I've seen that I think it is uncharacteristically sloppy of them, but their in-game management I think is still
For
as
sure.
good as it's ever been.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if they could fix that, I think they're the team that
We're in trouble.
they used to be. Yep.
Yeah. Let's go to Harlem, and they're also really set up well. Talk about another wide receiver that's been talked about a lot. It's Chase Claypool. He's going to be amazing, I think. He's only still growing. That's the thing that I have to emphasize. He's only still growing. I think he's still raw. I think he can get better. And so with that, it's going to be a scary force. And then on top of that, you got DK Metcalf. I think he's probably the best wide receiver to start off a team with just a young wide receiver who's with the great QB. This is another team that I think is going to be a contender for 2021, and just a couple weeks ago maybe we thought that Harlem could make the playoffs, but now it's no longer the case, and they're starting to think about the consolation bracket as well. But I think they're going to be super strong next year and beyond. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say this is kind of like the other side. We went from a team with 2 really, really strong, elite, keepable running backs to a team that has, you mentioned Claypool, Metcalf, T. Higgins, Cooper Kupp's under contract for next year at still decent price. I mean, it's 4 wide receivers right there. So I like it as well. Obviously, Higgins and Kupp coming from us at the deadline. So I like what Harlem did. And I think spending the money on Mike Davis, we were talking about how we were didn't have to address any of those injuries early in the season, able to play some upside guys, but spending the money on Mike Davis I think kept them competitive. Made some moves at the deadline to I think help their team out this year and also set them up well in terms of keepers for next year. So I like it. Still think it's a pretty strong team, and that's not kind of fits somewhere in the middle of the standings right now, or power rankings, at least in my mind. But set up really nicely for next season with, like you said, probably the best crop of keeper wide receivers in the league.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, when you talk about wide receiver keepers, these are not just any old regular wide receivers. These are, I think, some of the best to keep. It's just insane. Dustin, your thoughts?
This is a team that I think in terms of pure like keepable assets, it's definitely way up there. Like
Way up there.
It is crazy with Claypool, Metcalf, even T. Higgins with
Crazy.
Burrows has been so good.
Yeah.
I think the real concern here is, so this team can swing a lot in my mind. If running backs end up being a little bit cheaper next year than maybe we saw this year, then this team is going to be able to set themselves up so well because their wide receivers have so much talent, so cheap that they'll be able to go out and fill the rest of their roster really well. But the fact that they have no running backs under contract for next year, and no one that I see that could be really that capable, at least now. Well, I mean, things could happen, but at least now, that means if the running back market is really harsh again, they could be, roped into the $40 Le'Veon Bell that ends up being, garbage, or, the $90 Mixon, or for us, the $104 Elliott, and for some teams, you can't absorb, if something like that goes wrong. But at the same time, you can't not pay for any of those because, like, I mean, you have wide receivers, you need running backs, right? So for me, it's going to be really dependent on how the market plays out next year in the auction draft. If the if teams like Mars and Great Kills or other teams have seen how Christian McCaffrey turned out, how Ezekiel
Zeke
Elliott
Elliott,
turned
yeah.
out, how Mixon's turned out, and say, oh, whoa, like I think spending 90 plus on a running back, that just seems like a rough idea. And if everyone shifts their valuations of that top level running back down a bunch, then Harlem has the room to add like two of those guys pretty easily. But if people are still like, oh, the running backs are so scarce, I want a top running back for whatever price it takes, then this team could be a little bit more hamstrung because they have to go for one of those. You know.
Right.
So
They're
I
forced
think,
into it. Yeah.
I think the crazy disparity between wide receiver and running back in their keeper setup, it could be a good thing. It could be a really good thing, but it also could be dangerous, I think, going into next year.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting question. And on top of that, the other thing is that we are super flex. It's the QB position is super, super important. And so I believe they don't have a
they're one of the teams that don't have a
keepable QB, right?
quarterback.
Yeah, they don't. Unless you think Taysom. No, he's unkeepable. Yeah, so so even if you thought about keeping Taysom Hill, you can't. But in any case, it's going to be interesting how they answer those questions at the other positions. Yes, their wide receivers, I think, are the best, but you've got other holes. You got other spots to fill in for a starting roster. Yeah, Matt, go
Also,
ahead.
The one thing I'll say, I mean, you never know what they'll be able to do before the draft. I mean,
Sure.
there are some
Right.
keeper running backs that moved pre-draft this season, but
True.
you never know what that landscape's going to look like next season if people are starting to maybe be less reluctant to trade a keeper running back. But I mean, it like you said, it's not just any keeper wide receivers. You could have a $10 Chase Claypool, $11 T Higgins. Cooper Cup's only $15. I mean, some insane.
These guys are
numbers, and
insane,
I
yeah.
think if you wanted to make a splash, and even if running back prices don't get depressed at the top end, I mean, sometimes that might just be a risk you're gonna have to take, and risk a CMC type injury, or a Zeke losing Dak and losing a lot of his value. That, I mean, you have the flexibility with those keeper values, and maybe that's just something you have to do even if the prices don't come down. It's, you kind of, like Dustin said, you kind of paint yourself into a bit of a corner, and you're pretty heavily reliant on that running back. But if there's no other option, at least you have
Sure.
the flexibility cap wise to make that decision if that's the route you want to go, instead of a bunch of $40 Le'Veon Bells or $30 David Johnsons or whatever it is.
Yep. And on top of that, again, I think the QB position will be interesting as well, how they address that. Since we're talking about all, yeah, go ahead.
Harlem should look right across this matchup, and I think LIC a trade for Aaron Jones using. Did they have Shark?
They did.
Shark?
Yeah.
That should be the blueprint. Like
Yep.
Shark and Singletary for Aaron Jones. That kind of deal would be perfect if it exists for Harlem next offseason.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that kind of trade is always out there, but I'm sure it's something that they'll heavily be looking for.
Of course.
Something that could really balance their roster a bit.
Yeah. Since we're in the mold of talking about all these keeper assets, let's just go to New England. Let's just talk about their keepable assets. They lost, of course, and I think we'll talk a little bit about the contending teams in a little bit. But yeah, they they put up the worst score of the week. I think the story is more about what next year will be, right? It's going to be the AJ Brown show. It's going to be potentially Josh Jacobs back, potentially some of these other guys. Lamar, of course, is back on contract, and then DJ Chark, as we just mentioned. And so in contrast with Harlem, it's a little bit of mix of different positions, but nothing that is as good as what he has with DK Metcalf or Chase Claypool. So it's an interesting mix, but we'll see exactly who gets kept and for how long, and then what happens to the other fringe keepers, right? Because I think there's a lot of keepers here that could potentially be kept, but definitely cannot be all kept by New England. I want to hear what your thoughts are, Dustin.
Yeah, so for me, there's two ways this New England situation could go. Next year could end up being yet another kind of bridge gap year where it probably won't be as bad as this year because, hopefully you have better injury luck. But it might be a year where, you're not one of the favorites or like a top-notch contender. And that situation would be in my mind, if Lamar Jackson does not rebound somewhat to, 2019
19,
levels.
yep.
That's one scenario. Because for me, I feel very strongly that, A.J. Brown and even Josh Jacobs, is a really good base. But if Lamar Jackson is playing at 2020 levels at the price that he's at next year, it's going to have to be another bridge year where, you'll probably do better. You'll probably have a little bit more flexibility. But it might not be a contending year. But if Lamar Jackson does bounce back a little bit to 2019 levels, then I think, this team could be a contender again next year. So for me, that's the big flex point for me. Lamar Jackson is really, he's making enough money where that should be obvious, but he's going to be very, very important on what next year looks like for you. And obviously, you don't want to think about, oh shit, am I going to go through 2 years where I'm, kind of bridging or rebuilding or whatever that's called. But like, it has to be a possibility because that happened with the Great Kills franchise when we gave Peyton Manning
Yep.
like a 3-year deal.
Yes, you
It was
did.
pretty big.
Yep.
It did win us one championship.
The first
like,
one.
You
Yeah.
got one championship on the first.
Yep.
But then we had two bridge years where we were kind of, scraping away all the overextension we had done with our guys, trying to keep that core together for a little bit longer and try to squeeze out more championship years. That's what we did. I think that's kind of what you did.
Yep.
And for me, yeah, next year, for me, it's not a question about Josh Jacobs, AJ Brown. Those guys are solid in my mind. It's not a
Lamar.
question about will you find decent, tertiary or quaternary keepers. I'm sure you'll find something out of I think like 4 or 5 choices that are like not obvious, but I think something will emerge. For me, it's Lamar Jackson. If Lamar Jackson is, the Lamar Jackson he is this year, I'm afraid next year is kind of going to be, a middling year. But if he comes back, I think we could see you bounce back to being a contender right away next year. So that's what I think, the future of New England looks like.
Yeah. Before we get to you, Matt, I just want to say that the main difference between Lamar and Peyton is the age. Thank God. Thank God. Thank God. I mean, I remember that contract very vividly because when at the time when I was looking at what is making these teams win, to me it was that QB position, right? And I thought Peyton Manning was a huge difference maker for you. And then I saw you give him that contract, and then I was like, oh man, at 87, I guess it's not that big of a difference anymore. Especially also his play deteriorated as well. But
yeah.
You're right. I think
he fell off a cliff a little bit harder than I was expecting. Him
right.
But it came
no one saw that. Yeah.
yeah.
But
I mean, I'm not comparing because age is obviously a huge differentiator. But just in terms of like how our teams were built,
for sure,
how our teams were set up,
for sure,
it's that that long commit or big commitment to that quarterback that got us there. And then up down year, and if he snaps out of it, Payne obviously wasn't able to because for him it was age.
He got too old, yeah.
Yeah, Lamar, it's not age, right? So if he is able to bounce back with offensive system revamp, or if he targets some things that he can improve and stuff, then I think you have a better chance of like competing next year than I probably did looking at my third year of Payne. But I think it's like the same principle.
It is,
yeah. It is hinging on their play so much just because they are making a big amount, and that is non-negotiable. Like you can't lessen how much they're making.
Nope.
In any way. So.
Nope. Yep. I definitely agree with your point, and it is going to come down to him, and hopefully he takes this bad season and motivates himself to be really good for my 2021 season. Come on, Lamar, you can do it. Matt, if you want to finish up with your thoughts here.
Yeah, no, I'll first I just want to say Dustin said we got a championship out of Peyton. He got the championship, and then I joined as co-owner.
Man.
And had to deal with the shitty contract.
Oh, wow.
Dustin got the good parts, and then I think I joined. We were trying to deal with the corpse of Peyton Manning.
Oh man.
Co-owning, so
Was quite a corpse.
But,
Was quite a corpse.
no, I mean, not too much else to add on your team. We keep it moving, but I think you know, Cam Akers and J.K. Dobbins too. I mean, guys that we were talking about the value of running backs.
J.K. Yeah,
Those
right.
situations next year. So you have two guys right there that right now, they're pretty much mysteries, but in terms of what their value could be. But depending on what happens in those backfields and how the season finishes out, your keeper situation could be looking a lot different come preseason next year.
Right.
Yeah, really, really good point. Yeah, if Ingram gets cut, I don't even know what his contract situation is, but if Ingram's not there next year, J.K. Dobbins starts looking very, very attractive at whatever price you could keep him at. Cam Akers, he flashes just enough where you think, damn, if he just strings together, 2 or 3 of these, then maybe it'll convince them like he should be the lead guy. But he has been a little bit up and down, but we still have
For sure.
6 or 5 or however many weeks left in the season. So that's what I was saying. Like, I'm not worried about obviously AJ Brown or Jacobs. I'm not worried that one of these guys, like Dobbins or Akers or maybe even both, I'm not worried that one of those guys will become like a good enough keeper to slot into your other spots. For me, yeah, it just comes down to Lamar Jackson for me. So, good luck on that.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting you say that it could be another bridging year, and honestly, I am already thinking it could be a bridging year.
I hope not for your sake, but I went through it, so I think it could be.
Honestly, I don't even think it's that bad of a thing either. Like, I mean, of course you want to win the championship. I know a lot of teams, a lot of players, everyone wants to gun for the championship, and of course that's the goal. But it doesn't mean you necessarily have to win it automatically, right? Like, you have to still make sure you're making the moves that build up to the championship. It's not like everything all happens at once in 1 year. Sometimes it does, but a lot of times it's years and years of work. And so I'm okay trusting the process. Just gotta work through it. And if Lamar isn't the same guy as last year, then that's fine. I mean, he definitely won't be the same guy as last year. There's no way he's gonna put up that kind of performance ever again, as I said multiple times. But if he can flash, then I'll take it, and we'll move from there. But if he doesn't, then I'll just try the best I can, and that's okay. I'm paying the price for it, and that's fine with me.
I mean, if it makes you feel any better, we after we bridged, we built into finishing in the consolation bracket, finishing first. And then the season after, I'm sure what happened. So it's not it does suck on a 1-year level to be like, oh, maybe this year, like, I'm going to be at such a disadvantage because, maybe like I don't have like that great setup, but, a mediocre setup could be a building block towards a great setup. It just might take an extra year to get there. But, if you replenish and then get your team back where it needs to be, I mean, winning a championship every 3 or 4 years, that's still great. So, like,
still amazing. Yeah,
it's not like, oh damn, like 1 year and last year I didn't. Those are standards that that shouldn't be like how you judge your team in this league. So
exactly, it's just the competitiveness of this league. Sorry, competitiveness of this league. You can't win straight for 2-3 years. You just can't. It's just way too competitive. And so, sacrificing a couple of years to build up to that one big year, worth it. Definitely worth it. And in talking about that, let's go to Oakland, where I think they've sacrificed quite a bit of years to get this one big year, where they went undefeated earlier in the season, and now I think they've done a pretty good job of getting themselves ready for the playoff push. They put up almost 200 points this week. I think a lot of their players are coming back just at the right time, and a lot of them are running backs too, who I think are going to be very important in these last couple of weeks. You could take it any direction you want, Matt, but just talk about Oakland here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really strong team. It's a team that Dustin and I have been talking about and watching all season long. And like you said, getting healthier, getting some guys back. So it's a scary team to me. I was, you guys can take it, I guess, to this season. I was going to mention one thing that I noticed just looking at Oakland, talking about kind of like the new format.
Mm-hmm.
And guy like T.J. Hawkinson under contract for next year, Boston Scott under contract for next year.
Yep.
Allen Robinson, Kenyon Drake,
a lot of guys. Yeah.
A lot of guys. But just thinking, particularly like a guy like Boston Scott, for instance, and
right.
Dustin and I were talking about this when the new system came in place, and just how dead cap and teams probably having more dead cap and that becoming more common just because of the new system, and also practice squad and contracts getting offered through that. So I think it's going to be interesting in the next couple of years to see how that changes. Auction values, how people manage their salary and cap space, because I think people are going to have to start working a lot more around dead cap space than they did in the old system. So I think it's just another, interesting element or layer to the league.
For sure. And it's going to be a
I didn't
lot
mean
of
to
fun.
single out Boston Scott. There are a lot of other guys that
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
similar
There's,
situation,
yeah.
but just looking at just kind of struck me looking at Oakland's team and some of the contracts they have. But yeah,
Yeah, without naming players, he's going to have to make some decisions before the cut deadline at the keeper.
yep.
At the keeper deadline. He's going to have to make some cuts. And so, yeah, he's going to have dead cap, and he's going to have to navigate around it. It's going to be interesting.
And he's not going to be the only one. I think
No,
like I said,
no,
I
for
think
sure.
it's going to be a normal occurrence. I think people will get used to it and adjust to it. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it starts to play out.
Yeah. Dustin, your thoughts on Oakland?
Yeah, I actually just want to expand on that point. It's actually really interesting how certain teams have decided to, play the dead cap game. Uh, Obviously, the bad teams, the teams that have kind of, been hit hard this year, they're not afraid of dead cap. I think New England has like 52. Mars has
I
more
do.
than 66 because they've, IR'd Odell. I think they have like $100
Oh
of
my
dead cap
God,
or
I do.
something. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's not surprising. Your teams are bad. I mean, unfortunately, getting really rough injuries and stuff force you to make
Oh
cuts
my
and
God.
make bigger risks than possible.
Yeah.
But Oakland is actually one of the few teams that didn't have to deal with any of that, but still is really aggressive with dead cap. 33 dead cap is, I think, the highest of any team that it has a winning record. All the other Virginia, has 0. We only have 10. So I think we saw him play with that dead cap a lot more aggressively than I think some of the other teams that are contending are. And some ways that it worked out, obviously, it gives them a Boston Scott that they were able to slot in. They're not afraid of it, so they can take on a TJ Hawkinson deal, like Kenyon Drake. He's not dead cap this year, but it kind of just shows like, oh, he's not afraid of having that dead cap. And Buccaneers defense, Colts defense, like those defenses that paid off in a couple of weeks. You do see the result of it later on, but you know it's hard to say. Like, was it worth it for them? Was the Bucks defense play worth it? Probably, I would say that the 5 dead cap is going to make it tighter for them to add even anyone else. But at the same time, is it worth it if you get one extra win during the regular season? So I just really don't understand. I don't really have a point on like what the meta should be or what the optimal strategy should be. But I do think it's really interesting how Oakland is a very aggressive dead cap user, and Virginia is very stingy. No dead cap, no contracts
0.
that they ended up cutting.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see teams like a lot of teams are doing trial and error right now. We'll see some people change their strategy going forward. But I do think we're in a new era with the dead cap, and we're seeing how different teams handle it different already. And I think it's going to keep on uh, evolving, and teams are we're going to see some really interesting transactions that play on the differences of how teams value that stuff. But in terms of Oakland season for this year, they did dip after their 7-0 start. I think 3 losses in a row, but then they bounced back. And I don't think it's that surprising. It really just did come down to injuries. He did kind of make fun of his own team for a while. Like, when he was 7-0, he was like, "Oh, my team's not that good." His team did deserve to be 7-0. And the 3 losses were not because his team's getting exposed. His team just got injured. And now we're seeing those guys come back. I think Austin Eckler coming back first week, 17 fantasy points. I think that's so encouraging. He might have expected a little bit more of a slow ramping up, but 17 points in his first week means that he's getting pretty much the full version of Eckler the rest of the way. So I think this team. I think some people are kind of overlooking it. I know he has gone back and forth. He first was like making jokes about his own team, and now he's like talking up like he's gonna win. And like I don't know what everyone's perception of his team is, but I do think his team is right up there with the favorites, as you might say. I do think recent developments have turned it into, it was kind of a one horse and then like kind of three horses close to each other. But now I think all four horses going into playoffs will be pretty close to each other. So I think this team should not be overlooked, and the running backs coming back at the right time just could make them a very very good bet to win it all.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree. I think this is one of the best teams for sure. Um, there's
If Kirk Cousins is throwing 40 plus times a game, it makes them instead of 25 times a game, it makes a huge difference too.
right, and he's got Justin Jefferson. I mean, Jefferson houses it. That's a QB. I mean, that's TD for the QB. Yeah, his team is very good, and again, kudos to what Dua has been doing. I think there were moments where it looked like their team was headed really in the wrong direction, but he's turned it around. I think he made a couple great moves to get some useful players for this stretch run, and he's still enduring through some injuries, but it's going to be good for him, I think, in the next couple of weeks. All right, so I think Matt, are you still there, or do you need to head out now?
Yeah, I'm still here now, but I got to jump actually before the last matchup discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
sure.
could sign him off.
Yeah. You can head out, Matt. No worries. We don't want to hold you if you
Yeah, no,
got better
thanks
things to
for
do. No, I'm just kidding.
Is there
no,
anything you
thanks
want to
for
say before you leave?
Yeah. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say thanks for moving it to Friday and having me on. I always like coming on, so I'll have to do it again. And like I said last year when I was on, this has become my favorite fantasy league I'm in. Been in it for a handful of years now, and every year it's something different. You guys keep it fresh with rule changes that I think improve the league, so it always feels fresh, and it's just a fun league and a really really competitive league to be in. So I enjoy it, and looking forward to an exciting finish to the season. Like you guys were just saying, I think there's some really strong teams at the top this year. So curious to see how it all plays out, and you know, if this season continues the way it's been, expect some surprises. So that's a
Definitely.
bit of an oxymoron, but
Definitely.
yeah. No, thanks for having me, and looking forward to a fun finish to the season.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, and we hope to have you on again, man. It's always fun to have you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Peace. We don't have too many more matchups, but I was trying to save the last one. There's two more, but the last one's definitely going to be the juiciest one, I think, with Virginia Capital Region. But let's first hit up Yonkers here, taking the victory over Flushing. It's been unlucky for Yonkers, I think. Starting with all the injuries that they again had to face early in the season, and then they made a couple moves here and there that didn't end up working out for them. And now they've got really low scoring outputs from a lot of their players. But Tyreek Hill
Tyreek Hill
is
Jesus
amazing.
Christ.
And he made up
Oh my
for
God.
all of the other wide receivers. Like, literally, you look at all the wide receivers, he made up for all of it and more. Except for Juju, I guess. But all of it and more. It's insane. And I think because of Tyreek Hill and the Pittsburgh defense, this team came out on top to put a little bit of a damper on Flushing's playoff chances. But, Flushing could be ending up fine. But let's talk a little bit about Yonkers and what they're looking forward to, I guess, for this season and then also the next season, Dustin.
I mean, yeah, their season, we forget it because, I mean, we don't forget it, but it happened so early. But Saquon Barkley's
Yeah.
injury is obviously gonna crush any team.
Mm-hmm.
You try to say, all right, that happened. Let's work our way past it. But in the end, there's no replacing a talent of that caliber. Especially because he was a keeper for him. I think what he can look forward to going into next year is obviously hopefully a full healthy year of Saquon with the best supporting cast that Saquon Barkley has had. Hopefully, so he's invested in, I think, the Giants offense to continue to get better, that offensive line to continue to get better. And we've seen some performances from Wayne Gallman where you think, man, if Saquon Barkley was, running behind what, Wayne Gallman is running right behind right now, he can really do some damage with it. So,
Yep.
yeah, I think, it is disappointing for him this year, I'm sure, to come up short of a playoff spot. But, I think the prospect of getting Saquon back next year, it should be a big, something to look forward for Yonkers fans. Otherwise, I mean, I hate to say it, but I think they probably do have to regret trading away AJ Brown. AJ Brown has really turned on. Seems like every time Yonkers trades away a Tennessee Titan, it seems like I mean, we knew AJ Brown was good, but like he did kind of just start breaking out again. I mean, it was health related, but yeah, he did bust out after he traded him, and we saw the same thing happen with
Derrick Henry.
Derrick Henry. Yeah, so maybe I don't know. If he's looking for the Tennessee Titans to do as well as possible, I guess he should draft the whole Tennessee Titans team and trade them away in season just to get that boost for everyone. But yeah, other than that, like I don't know. It's hard to say what this keeper group looks like other than Saquon. I'm actually a little bit looking on it more closely. I'm actually maybe a little bit worried what he has going forward. What do you think?
Yeah, he only has under contract Darius Slayton and James Conner in addition to Saquon. It is going to be a little bit tough for him, I think, in terms of figuring out who the last couple keepers will be, and I expect him to hit the trade market, I bet,
Right.
in the
This is
offseason,
actually
but
this is sorry. This is actually a little bit rougher
we'll
of a
see.
situation than
Yeah.
I expected because I didn't think he didn't seem like a team that was buying during the trade deadline. I guess his buy was a little bit earlier with the Michael Thomas trade. Um, but yeah, I'm surprised that he doesn't have more around Saquon, and I'm actually a little bit maybe worried, or like maybe they'll have to get a little bit creative to find good enough pieces. I think to really make a strong push next year.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting what they do. You're right. There aren't that many pieces, and
Yeah,
maybe
this is surprising. I guess I just haven't been paying too close attention to Yonkers, but for how decent their team has been all year, I would have expected a couple of guys to be like, cheap, keepable guys, but there aren't a ton. Some of these guys would be stretching it, but maybe keepable. But also some of these guys are,
does
yeah,
he
yeah, surprising me, yeah.
does he not have Daniel Jones? I forget. He doesn't. Does he? Did he drop him?
No, he still has Daniel Jones, but I mean his keepability is also, weird.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I don't know exactly what is in their minds right now. It looked like they went all in by trading away AJ Brown and Judy as well, but it looks like they don't have as much, and
Oh, what did
maybe
they trade Judy for? Sorry.
Mark Andrews.
Oh, okay.
And maybe Mark Andrews is no, probably not. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what they do. Do you think, in your mind, are they one of the favorites to win the consolation bracket? Turning it back to this
Um,
year.
yeah. I wouldn't consider them favorites. I think they're in the mix, to be perfectly honest. They've had some down weeks. They've had some decent weeks. It really just comes down to, I think, so their running backs, despite the Barkley injury, had been kind of like keeping them very steady, like in the middle weeks of the season. But Gurley, I don't know if Gurley's been hurt. Yeah, he's been hurt, and he was getting a touchdown a week for them. So that's not there. Connor has COVID. McKinnon. So I think the running backs are a little bit shaky right now compared to where they were mid-season. So I probably would not consider them favorites. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think this is like one of the weirdest teams to look at what they've done this year, because for a part in the season they look like one of the most dangerous teams in the league,
Right.
and then for this part, they're looking a little bit weaker, and they don't have like the keepers that I would expect from a team that's kind of and they're out of the playoff hunt. So yeah, I don't know. This is a very, I guess it just shows that like I haven't been really paying too close attention to what's been happening like right in the middle of the league, and like this is just yeah, I'm just still surprised. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be weird. I think, I mean, I have the same kind of concern. I hope this isn't a case of a slow adjustment to the new meta of the new
Yeah.
keeper rules.
Yeah.
In the past, maybe with three keepers, this is acceptable doing something like this, right? Where you have a top-notch blue chip Barkley, and then you have
Right.
someone who's
Right.
okay with Connor and Slayton, and that's fine. You carry those over, and then you're good to go for the next year. Now we're talking about more 5 to 6 keepers mostly. Most of the time it's probably around 5 for most teams, and so upping the quality all throughout is going to be interesting. Maybe this is a team that thinks about giving one of those longer term deals. I don't know. I don't know how they approach it, but they must have something in the works, in their plan, in their mind. But I don't know. We'll see how their strategy
Yeah.
will work out for them.
That's
Um,
actually that's actually a really good point. I do think maybe this kind of roster would have worked in previous years with three keeper
yeah,
limit, and the raises were smaller and stuff. But with the raises being pretty much 9 minimum for any player, and that just makes a lot of guys that aren't keepable that would have been keepable in the past, and all other teams are, like you said, going with 5, 4, 6, whatever. That having one really good keeper and then a couple like middling ones is putting you at a disadvantage to start a season. So I do think that's a really good point on maybe they just haven't figured out how to navigate this new keeper system. And I do, yeah, I do think maybe we could criticize it for, because they do have pieces that during the trade deadline they could have maybe traded
yep,
away for keepers,
yep,
and I guess they were stuck in the position of like, oh, we're close enough to playoffs where I think maybe we go for it. But then he probably knew that his keepers weren't great, so that he kind of did want to buy a keeper.
yeah.
But
It's awkward.
yeah, it is awkward. I think awkward is the right word. I do wonder, if in the Discord, or if um, Jay ever does hear this like show, like I wonder if he can talk through some of his like uh, thinking at the time, like, oh, well, what was his goal? Like, what did he think was going to happen? Like, what did he think about his keepers at the time? Because it is really interesting here, and it is kind of awkward, and I do want to see what his thought process was.
Yeah, and another team that has been really quiet in the trade deadline was Flushing, right? They
Yeah.
also stood pat, and it's really worked out for them, I think, in a way. But also maybe it also hasn't worked out, right? Like you can kind of argue it both ways here, but that's all in hindsight because, as we've mentioned before, he's got a lot of good players, and it all
Right.
comes down to the two QBs he's got with Deshaun and Kyler. Deshaun Watson, he's amazing. I mean, he's been doing really well recently, and we'll see if that continues with Will Fuller. And with Kyler Murray, he's got that injury. Maybe he doesn't run as much. We'll see. But there are obviously reasons to be happy, but there are also reasons to be a little bit concerned as well.
I actually want to disagree with one of your points.
Yep,
Yes, they did do pretty much the same thing at the trade deadline, which is pretty much nothing, right?
sure.
But although it seems like they were in similar positions, just in the playoff mix and whatever, I don't think they're in the same situation, because for Flushing, if they stood pat, and what they could always do with their keepers is just tack on more years to Kyler Murray, tack on more years to Deshaun Watson to make him cheaper and to have him for longer years,
Right, right.
because those guys are so good and they're still cheap. For Yonkers, there is no guy that you could just tack on years to fill up to 7. Um, Saquon Barkley's already going to be 40 next year, so there's a limit to maybe you could tack on
No,
one
you,
more
you,
year,
you
but
can't. You
yeah,
can't. They're legacy keepers. So
no,
Connor,
yeah,
Barkley, they can't.
Or,
Yeah.
right, good point. So you can't even do that. But Flushing, I kind of am less hard on them, like not making a move at the trade deadline,
Mm-hmm.
because of what I said. Like, okay, like they don't win it all this year, and the keepers they have are the keepers they'll go into next year. They could just add more years to even Terry McLaurin, more years to Deshaun Watson, more years to Kyler Murray. That's fine. For Yonkers, I think right now I see maybe 3 keeper years accounted for, and you still need to fill 4 more. And I don't really see what guy on their roster could even be worthy of that. So I think Yonkers is in a much tougher position going forward, even if they both end up missing playoffs and they both did the same thing at the trade deadline.
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, those are valid points. One thing with Flushing that I just thought about is with him standing pat. I think I really do applaud what he's done with that. And there are multiple reasons for it. The first is that he has historically been one of the struggling teams, I think, in terms of the win-loss record. And if you have a great set of keepers already, and you don't need to really go all in at the moment, you could still just play for success over multiple years. And that's, I think, still completely fine. I mean, there is, of course, the narrative, oh, you're not a winner, oh, you're not a winner because you don't have the trophy. Sure, but if you're a franchise that's been, one of the worst in the league, then you're not even thinking too much about the chip. You just want to improve, right, to a certain level so that you're not in that conversation for one of the worst in the league. So I think that's admirable. And then the other part of it is that maybe you're not comfortable in making those kind of moves yet, right? You have to still learn and how to figure out what type of moves you know how to make, and then move on to those types of deals where you can masterfully make a deal at the trade deadline, get some good pieces, and then win the chip at the end of the day. I think we saw a case that we'll get to where I think maybe the owner wasn't as comfortable making that kind of deal at the deadline, and you can really see the after effects now of what they've done. And so I applaud Flushing. I think sometimes it isn't about making the big balls move. Obviously, you can applaud the big balls move too. I think that's admirable in its own right. But I think what Flushing is doing, it's perfect for what they need to do for their franchise to turn around their reputation and then potentially win one later. It doesn't always have to be this year. I think one of the points that I stress.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. We always talk about the good moves and the bad moves, but sometimes the best move is not making a move.
Yeah.
And I think you're spot on here. Especially if you look at the type of roster that Flushing has, to get anything significant, they would have had to trade away, I think, a foundational building block for their franchise. And, I don't think that would have still gotten them to being a favorite for this year or whatever, Like, I just don't think that type of move was out there. Like, I would not trade Terry McLaurin for pretty much, I'm so high on him. I think if he gets a good quarterback, he's going to really explode into, like, top 3 fantasy receiver type of player. I think he's one of the future superstars at that position. And, obviously, like, trading Kyler or Deshaun, it would have been pretty much impossible, I think, to improve their team to the point where, they're heavy favorites for this year. And that would have weakened their team going forward. So I think, next year, keep that core together. Honestly, if they did a little bit better in the auction draft with, maybe the Mixon money was spent a little bit poorly and so forth. Obviously, they got a Cortland Sutton injury, too, that set him back. If things turn out a little bit better next year to start, and you still have that core of Watson, Kyler obviously, and Terry McLaurin, I think not making the move is something that could really, really pay off for them in the future.
Yeah, and of course, this season isn't over either. I mean, I've been talking they've lost already, but no, they can win the playoffs. They can win the whole thing this year as well. So it's going to be interesting how it turns out for Flushing, regardless, right? Even if they don't make the playoffs, even if they do make the playoffs, it's going to be an interesting story, no matter what.
Yeah, regardless of whether they win it all or not, like, I think they can be encouraged with a lot of things that they've done this year.
Absolutely.
It's a building block season for them because, like you said, they're historically, one of the most struggling teams in our league, and I think, this isn't just a case of like, they just lucked into some like good, players this year. I think they have made some real changes to their process that we're seeing, now they're not falling to the same, mistakes that they maybe did for years ago. And, that's part of the reason why I say the league is just, so much better now than it was. Like, that's part of the reason I think, some teams are struggling to adjust to this world where all 10 teams are a threat, every year.
Absolutely. Even one of the teams that we say is struggling, they're about to make the playoffs, potentially. It's wonderful league. Just great. Definitely pushes you to the max, which I think is amazing, and it really makes you feel good when you win, right? If or when you win, it's just you've defeated 9 other really great owners. Let's go to Virginia Capital Region, and this is I think the marquee matchup. Virginia fighting for their playoff lives. Capital Region was the favorite for the playoffs. Someone that we were all scared of. Let's start with Capital Region. And just building off the conversation that we had about Flushing, where they did make the move at the deadline, and I am going to be pretty critical. I was critical at the time. It really blew up in their face. I mean, no one saw that Fuller was taking a PED. I don't think anyone could have foreseen that. I don't think anyone could have foreseen that.
Virginia saw how LIC would trade a player right before they were about to do something nasty, get suspended. So Virginia tapped into the inside news on Houston's locker room and figured out, oh, Will Fuller's on steroids. We gotta trade that guy away right quick before he pops. And I think that's what we saw happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about the totality of their moves that they made with Virginia, right? Capital Region and Virginia, the storylines are so intertwined with these two teams. Capital Region has given up a lot of depth, a lot of really good players. For of course, really good players on their own right? Delvin Cook and Will Fuller. It was an amazing return, but if he still had a couple of those pieces, if he was a little bit better in those negotiations, if he was able to get a couple more players in return, maybe he could be able to get through the damage that's been done to Alvin Kamara, to Miles Sanders now, and maybe even to Tyler Lockett. I'm not so sure that he's buried for dead, but I mean it does look like Kamara is going to be pretty ineffective with Taysom Hill. Until when? Until Drew Brees comes back, and maybe like week 15, that's just in time for his third place finish. Like it's just gonna be a little bit rough for him, I think, in terms of how we were thinking. This team is unstoppable with Mahomes and Kelsey, but no, now his running backs look a little shaky. We talked about Dalvin Cook and his rough schedule. A lot of cause for concern, and it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder a lot about what they've done this season. It's not just the trades. There have been other things that they've done that were slightly questionable. I know they were talking also about their defensive moves that they had a little bit of regret on. I think that those are valid, of course.
Also, Virginia was the team that beat him out twice. Twice for those defenses that he regretted not getting.
Right.
So I think these two teams are, their fates are very, very entwined.
Yeah.
And, honestly, if you look at each transaction, including like the defense pickups and all that, like, because that was kind of head to head, they were both bidding on the same defenses and stuff, and the trades, obviously, I think it's clear that Virginia has done quite a lot of damage to Capital Region.
Yeah.
A lot of it is bad luck, obviously.
Sure.
Can't predict a lot of this stuff, but you have to give credit for Virginia making some, I think, really, really smart moves that directly turned out to be somewhat of a sticking point for a Capital Region right now. If you look at where their roster is hurting, like they could definitely use some of the pieces that they gave away, and Will Fuller getting suspended just makes it look worse. And yeah, I mean these two teams are I mean you can't tell the story of the season without talking about what these two teams have done with regard to each other, and it should be really interesting if the first round of playoffs or even a finals is between these two teams. It could.
Wow.
The storylines could just be so
juicy.
So juicy.
Yeah. And I think the story is it's of course going to be written for this year, but it's also going to be bleeding into next year as what remains with Capital Region, right? It's just Mahomes, and he does have Kamara that he can franchise tag, and hopefully Kamara will be okay with whoever the QB is. Maybe it's Taysom Hill again, but either way, that's
actually huge. Like if Drew Brees retires after this year, like I think he will,
it's over.
Maybe Kamara's not the guy that I tag, and maybe
Dalvin is the guy. Yeah, right. And then Miles Sanders is probably someone who Ken probably thought that he could rely on for future years, and maybe that's not the case anymore. I don't know. I think it's going to be very interesting. Capital Region, he did give up a lot. Again, we keep saying this over and over. I think he gave up so much, but it's all going to go away if he wins this year. But
it is.
Man.
But it really is kind of all or nothing for him.
It's all or nothing.
I mean, his team's not destroyed next year. Like Mahomes.
Sure. Yeah.
Will keep any team looking like, oh yeah, I can definitely win it this year. Like you'll always think that, but it's undeniable that he did push almost all his chips all in. So to lose this one, to lose this year, it'll be one that he'll regret for a while, especially if you look across, within division to Virginia, where they have so many of the pieces that Capital Region gave up. That's what I'm saying. I always said this at the beginning. It's a no lose for Virginia. And for Capital Region, if they win it all, it's worth it. If not, they're gonna regret it. So I think that sums it up completely. If Virginia comes out next year and Herbert and Galladay and DeAndre Swift, if they're major parts of this team that is at the top of their division next year, and Capital Region is right below them or whatever, then he's gonna be like, if he won it this year, then he's gonna be like, okay, whatever, like I got my championship at least. But if he didn't, it's gonna burn him up a little bit, I think.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I'm looking forward to future Hua versus Ken matchups. This is I think, a great storyline for the league. Virginia, Capital Region, divisional. Now, I think, in a way, rivals as they've,
Yeah, yeah.
as they've.
I think this does intertwine their rivalry. I think is like a thing because it's gonna be for a couple years, especially with so much of their core is exchanging teams. He's gonna see Herbert, and Herbert's always gonna be a guy that started on Capital Region,
Yeah,
but is on Virginia, and same for Galladay, same for Swift. I mean, Swift could be big by himself, so.
right.
It'll either be a situation where Capital Region can't stand to like even look at Virginia's roster. Hopefully it doesn't turn out that way for Capital Region, but if he does win it all, it'll be easy to forget.
For sure.
The championship washes away everything.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
I mean, I
But
forgot.
the stakes are so huge for Capital Region going into this playoffs. I think there's more pressure on them to win it than pretty much anyone because of what the moves that they made during the trade deadline were.
Yeah, I was gonna make a joke that I forgot that Lamar was on contract, but no, no, no. It doesn't. It doesn't wash away everything. Of course, there are still weeks left. There's week 13, week 14, 15, 16. A lot can happen still. So, Capital Region, we're not counting you out. You definitely are still one of the top teams, one of the contenders.
I think they're
But
still slight favorites. I think the gap between Capital Region and the rest of the pack used to be sizable, but now I think the margin is still paper slim, but I still would give Capital Region the edge just because I think Travis Kelce is still the best tight
yeah,
end
exactly.
by a
Yeah,
decent margin,
right.
and as down of a week as Dalvin Cook had, as down of a week as Alvin Kamara had, I do think even with the change in Kamara's quarterback situation and stuff, and Dalvin Cook's schedule, I do think they will come back a little bit and improve, and even in a week where a lot of stuff didn't go that well, they still put up 180 fantasy points. Like that's pretty remarkable for a team that you think didn't do too well. But yeah, I do have to say the last 3 weeks have slimmed the margin a lot. I think I don't think it's ludicrous to say Great Kills is right up there with them. Oakland is right up there with them.
Of course
Virginia,
not. Yeah.
I mean, they just whooped them by 40 points. So obviously Virginia can compete with them. But yeah, I do thank the Capital Region just as a perspective as like a media member because now it's super interesting. I can really see any result happening, whereas before it did look like they were pretty heavy favorites.
Yep. It's gonna be interesting, and I'm gonna enjoy it either way. Shout out to Mick on the chat. I just want to say hi to him. Haven't seen it. Haven't talked. I guess I talked to you in a little, not too long ago, but still, just a quick shout out to Mick. Virginia here is the last team, saving the best for last. They got the Hamilton. Of course, the owner had a great life event that happened. Congrats again, Hua. But yeah, they put on a show for the new co-owner, Joe Hua there in Virginia. And this could be the start of a really good finish. And I think you had talked about it a little bit, Dustin, about how this team could finish great and potentially even win it all because we don't know what's going to happen week 13, week 14. But yeah, I think it's a really well-constructed roster. Again, it's a lot of the pieces that came from Capital Region's good fortunes and great plays. They're now on Virginia's roster, and a lot of them are getting healthier, and they're going to be really good.
Yeah, Joanna Hua, right? Is her
Yeah.
she has not been alive for any week where Virginia Hua has not won
Mm.
the Hamilton. So she
Undef-
probably thinks this is just normal. She's like, oh, okay, yeah. Like, and I don't know, maybe we'll see like a streak where fatherhood Hua goes on like this crazy
Yeah, it's like Fred Van Vliet.
nice. Yeah, yeah, it's funny stuff. This kid has lie for a week that Virginia Hall has lost. Or, I could see something like that happening because this team is definitely peaking at the right time. Obviously, I said it before. Derrick Henry is probably the reason that it's peaking at the right time.
Yep.
And I don't expect that to go away. I think his schedule is set up nice. His team, I mean, has openly said like, yeah, this is the month that we think Derrick Henry is going to dominate. And he was obviously good enough leading up to where this point, but now I think he's just going to be probably the one fantasy player that I want on my team over the next month if I'm in any league trying to win a playoff game, So I
100%.
think the only thing is that he does need you know Flushing to lose in front of them to make playoffs. But even if they don't, I think their core is just set up so nicely for the future, and that would just make Virginia the favorite, I think, for consolation bracket. So there really is not a really losing situation for them. I think any situation that happens, they have to be happy with it. Because if they miss playoffs and win consolation bracket or something like that, then they traded to get so many keepers that that's something you have to be willing to accept when you make those trades.
Hmm.
And if they win it all, then I mean they had their cake and they ate it too. So like they're getting both of it. So I just think this team has done the best job this year in terms of like maneuvering and making the right moves. We said it about the defenses, New Orleans and Miami, blocking Capital Region from getting either of those, and picking up two defenses that pair well together and are very talented defenses. It shows like he knew exactly how much to bid because I think he beat Capital Region by priority both times. So
Tiebreaker,
I
yeah.
just think that is he's made so many perfect moves. And the only thing I think that's holding him back is like the injuries that have made those moves kind of look less than perfect sometimes. But I mean, there's not much you can do about those. It is kind of crazy that having lost Joe Burrow for the year, having lost Dak Prescott for the year, having lost George Kittle for a good chunk of the year, um, and this team still could win it all. Like it would be very very little surprise to me if they won it all. So I think that just shows like they might not win it all. They might not finish with the best record. They might not you know show end this year showing that they were the best. But if I had to pick a single owner that did the best job, I think Watt did the best job this year, regardless of who wins.
Yeah, and that's great praise, high praise, really, in terms of his ownership and what he's done for the season in comparison relative to everyone else. I mean, a lot of other owners have really stepped up this year as well. I think the main question for me when I look at Virginia is the QB position. I think he's set, obviously, with Henry. You don't need any other running back, honestly. Just put whoever. And then his wide receivers.
He's like three running back.
Yeah, whatever. It's fine. And I like even though we make fun of Montgomery, I'm not going to praise Montgomery. I don't think he's that good, but he does score fantasy points, and I think that's all that matters. Sometimes he gets the stats. He will get the stats. He's the only show in town for Chicago, and I think he's got a really good schedule. Yeah, he's got Detroit, Houston, Minnesota, Jacksonville. Great on the schedule. He's going to be good. So I think there's no worries in terms of the rest of the roster. It's really the QB position, as you've mentioned.
Exactly
Burrow,
right. Yep.
Burrow going down, Dak going down. The main move that I think Claw probably regrets is Drew Lock.
I was gonna say, I think he's made two bad moves all year, which
yeah, the Drew Lock.
for any team is really good. I think the first bad move I thought was taking Jalen Rager over Justin Jefferson, or Antonio Gibson as it turned out. But I thought if you're gonna take a wide receiver at 2-1 or whatever, which he took Jalen Rager at, I thought Justin Jefferson was just by far the better talent.
Did he really take it 2-1? I need to check this out. Really?
Yeah, he took Rager 2-1, I think. So at the time, I thought it was a mistake, and I think it's still a mistake. If he had Justin Jefferson on this roster, it just would be kind of insane. And the other mistake, I think, is poaching Drew Lock when I don't know why anybody thought poaching Drew Lock was like a good idea, because that will probably a dead cap hit next year. And he's just not very good. I would not commit that for what Drew Lock brings to the table. So yeah, those are like the two main mistakes I think he made, but otherwise, I think he's been really good this season.
Yeah, I mean, as a Jerry Judy owner, I hate Drew Lock. I
Yeah, he's
despise him.
not good.
He's
He's not good.
awful. I mean, Judy is open all the time, like literally
Yeah,
all the time, but Locke never looks his way. Sorry, that's a tangent. But anyways, yeah, I think Virginia, other than the QB position, he's ready to go, and
yeah.
hopefully,
I forgot that Ryan Fitzpatrick isn't. He's probably a 1 or 2 week starter,
yeah,
so
yeah,
he's gonna have to reach for Drew Lock or somebody off late. I don't know like what his QB situation is gonna be, but his second quarterback will definitely be weaker than any
most
other playoff
others.
teams.
Yep. So hopefully he can figure something out for the rest of the season and you know have a fantastic ending to what I thought was a great season, and for a lot of people it's been a really good season. So yeah, so that is all of the teams. It went a little bit long today, so apologies there. I think we can just skip the transactions. I don't think there's been much free agent pickups unless you want to quickly say something, Dustin. I'm gonna skip for me.
No, yeah, you could skip. I mean, yeah.
There a lot of like little small moves. You know, nothing too
Yeah,
exciting that
yeah.
I don't think we need to cover. But
The
yeah.
Will Fuller. We could talk about the Will Fuller
Oh
trade.
yeah. I guess that is big news. Will Fuller not on the team anymore, and it picked up by Oakland for 8.
Were you surprised that he cut him? I didn't
Yes.
think he needed to be cut.
Yeah. Like so it's really funny. A day before the news came out of his suspension, I was thinking to myself, "Oh man, maybe Will Fuller is actually a keeper, and
Yeah,
maybe."
no, I thought so too. He was like 20, right?
Yeah, he was 20. And I was like, oh, yeah, maybe Ken actually did a good job there in getting a
Yeah,
keeper
no.
back.
If he didn't get suspended, if he finished the season strong,
Yeah,
if he stayed in the same situation or like
right,
better,
right.
I would keep him for 20. That'd be like $30.
30? Around 30.
It wouldn't be great, but it would be keepable.
It would be
I
keepable.
thought.
Yeah. So
Um,
it
Honestly,
was.
if he needed the roster spot, I probably would have dropped Gus Edwards. Like, are you gonna start Gus Edwards ever? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. I
Or I mean, or Preston Williams. Like, you're not gonna keep Preston Williams, are you?
probably not, but maybe.
He's just missed too much time for $20. I mean, I don't think he'll go for more than $20. So my question is like, why not, just cut someone else? Because he's not up. Oh, he's up against the cap. No, he's not up against the cap. He's at 335, ish. So it wasn't to clear up like the $10 cap. It was just literally for the roster space, right?
I
And
guess.
in that case, I'm gonna say it. I would have cut Preston Williams. I would have cut, even Gus Edwards. Either one of those I would have cut before giving a potential keeper to someone else. I'm guessing it was probably because he was pissed at him. It's a little bit of an anger cut, like fuck you, get off my team kind of cut.
Right.
But it's also a cut that I think was a mistake. Maybe it might not come back to haunt him too bad. But yeah, like this is kind of like Warren cutting Cup when he didn't have to. There were other moves to be made to open up that roster spot that I would have done before, cutting Fuller.
For sure. For sure. And
It just doesn't make a ton of sense to me.
I think I know Warren's asking if it was worse than Cup. I think the Cup one was a little worse for many reasons. The first is the timing of it. You had to do it right before the the pickups on the day of. But any case, Warren. And then the other thing was where Cup ended up for at the price that he did. Come on, man. That's unfortunate. For Fuller, I think he's a great player. A little bit higher in the price, and the rules are different now, so you can't take advantage.
For me, the new rules make it
Yeah,
make
you
Cup
can't take
probably the worst
advantage.
one because
Yeah, for sure.
Cup was kept for like 6, 9, and like $13.
Yeah, over
like,
3 years,
over
and
3 years.
had to
Back
be
when,
great
yeah,
kills that gets it. Oh my
yeah.
god! If only I knew.
For Will Fuller, it'll be he goes up like $8 or $9 at a time.
Yeah.
So it won't be long that he's keepable, and he won't be as good of a value for as long. So yeah, I would say Cup is probably worse, but you would expect to kind of learn from the Cup mistake and be like, do I want to cut? Like there are other guys to cut. I thought so. I'm gonna be equally as hard on this as maybe cutting Cup. So
Yeah, and
it's weird. It's weird.
my question is, do you really need to cut anyone? I feel like he is
That's
panicking. I think this is not just
Yeah.
like the Will Fuller suspension. I think it's like all of the things that we talked about with Kamara, with Miles Sanders, with Brady not looking so good, and Tyler Lockett. What's going on there? And like all of these things.
Fantasy tilt
Yeah,
is a
he's
real
tilting.
is a
This
real
is
thing.
this is
It's a real thing.
honestly, if it was me and I look at this in a vacuum, I would have just kept the roster that I had and just continued
Yeah.
on one
Yeah.
week. I mean, he picked up Kiki Cutie. That's the guy who
Yeah.
he picked up. Sure, you can take a bet, you could take a gamble, but at this point, just wait and see what you can
Yeah.
trust, what you have and what you don't have, and then make a move if you really, really, really need to. Honestly, for this week, he's already locked into the playoffs. You don't need to play too much for the week.
Completely agree.
So
Completely
week
agree.
14, just wait and see who can you
Yeah.
trust then, and if you've
Yeah.
got the moves, then you
Right.
make it then.
Fuller might have been a cut I considered somewhere down the line. Maybe week
Yeah, yeah.
14. You're
You
like,
can
I
think
need
about
this
it.
pickup.
Right.
Yeah. But this week literally means pretty much close to nothing. I mean, it does matter, I guess, for seeding and stuff, which I'm sure you would prefer to get higher seed, but it's not essential, So I would have
It
waited,
really isn't.
see what would have happened. I mean, I don't love it. I really thought it was a straight up mistake
It is.
made by Ken. So
He's tilting. Plus, it's like 6 that he put on Kiki and then 5 on Mike Lennon. Like, are people
yeah,
seriously betting this
yeah.
much on
Especially
these
for Mike
players?
Glennon, like,
Yeah, yeah. What's going on, man? Ken, come on.
yeah, come on. Mike Lennon, 23 fantasy. I mean, I'm not putting that much on him.
No one is putting that much on him, and like
Yeah.
it's for the. I know why he's doing it. It's for the bye week. It's for his third
Yeah.
QB slot. But again, you don't need it. Like if you are Hua or Andrew Chu and you need to get that last playoff spot, yes, this is fine. Completely, go ahead. Shoot your shot now. But you're thinking about week 14 only, in my opinion, right? So you don't need that backup QB. I think. If you do, then you think about it when you need to address it. So.
Yeah.
He's tilting.
Fantasy tilt is real. Like unrelated, but I do think that is one of the benefits of having a co-owner. It does kind of like
okay.
slow your process down. Like you're not as nimble. You're not able to like change directions on what you're doing or what you're thinking like that quickly because you're trying to like reason stuff out with your co-owner. But it also does save you from like just the tilt moments where you're just like fuck it, like I'm so pissed at this guy, I'm gonna cut him and then pick someone up. Usually, you'll a co-owner will be like, all right, like let's think about it. And if you think about it, you're like, you know what, thinking about it, like cutting, Fuller this week really does nothing over cutting him next week.
Really,
yeah. Or maybe this guy is better to cut. Like that's the kind of stuff that a co-owner does more than I think anything else. Like a lot of the other stuff, it's just like you would do fine by yourself, but just having a sounding board for you to like say something before you do it, like say, oh, I'm gonna cut Will Fuller, like let's pick someone else up, and then the co-owner will be like, okay, like why are we doing this? What do we really want to do this? And if you just talk about it, like even by yourself, like you'll eventually get over the tilt, and you'll just be like, all right, like let's make the logical move. But yeah, I think that this was definitely a case of tilt. Definitely, Swift, looking at Swift on the other roster, and and then seeing Fuller get suspended the same week, it's probably made him a special type of angry at at Fuller. So I can't say that the anger is unwarranted, but I do think the move was a poor move.
Yeah. You're letting your emotions get in control, and
Yeah.
I understand it, but at the same time, you have to realize that someone else is going to benefit off of it. Whereas if you had kept your cool, you can deny someone of a keeper, especially Oakland. They were in desperate need of someone that they could take a chance on, and Will Fuller at that price, it's a good chance as any. So, yeah, you guys are talking about Gus Edwards not being involved, and that is quite a concern for Gus Edwards.
No, so if it was for the cap space, I get it. If you have no one else to cut, like everyone else on his roster is either a handcuff necessary to him or someone that he'd feel comfortable starting if someone else gets hurt, then sure. But I mean, that's not the case here. He didn't open up that much cap space that he needed. It's just an unforced error again. Like I always say that the cup drop was an unforced error because Warren could have IR'd him. Warren could have just put him on IR, and it would have been a little, I think, $2 difference on the salary cap for him. And I don't think he didn't need that $2 extra. So he just had a brain fart. But I mean, this one less of a brain fart and just I think kind of emotions taking over and making him into an unforced error. I think so.
Yeah, I mean, if Devontae Adams becomes one of the reasons why you win the championship, then we can all trace it back to Warren's, the butterfly effect of Warren's drop of Cooper Kupp. But and yeah, and if you're listening to this, Ken, it's really funny. We criticize you for not making moves, and then once you make a move, we criticize you then. So it seems like we're just ragging on you, but just is the way of the business. And honestly, I do wish the best for you. Hopefully you can pull this out. It's going to be a rough couple of years if you don't. And I think a couple of people have, gone through that process, and hopefully you can learn from it. And when you have the next opportunity, make sure to capitalize then. So
yeah, I just hope this should be a learning experience for everyone.
It really should.
Honestly.
It really should.
This isn't just towards Ken or just towards like Warren or
nope.
like I've made errors of that ilk too, where it's like, ah, shit, I didn't have to do that, like there was a better move. But like by talking it out, like criticizing and stuff, like hopefully it does make everyone more cognizant of like what those kind of moves are and where you could fall into mistakes like that. Because I do think I think the league has done a great job at like turning these like criticism into like lessons. Because I think we've seen how Hua manages this year, and I don't want to say it's just because we criticize him or whoever criticized him, but I do think there's a process in Hua's process, Chu's process, Ken's process, even Duho's process. Like I think everyone's process does evolve and get better, and I think this is just one of the the mistakes that people make that you should be a little bit more careful about. Especially in a keeper league, it is important who you drop, when you drop them, why you drop them.
Yep, and I get it. It's they've been ragged on about how they don't have the trophy, and I was a victim of that as well for many years, and so it's something that I understand.
We ragged on Wonku so hard for liking Marcus Mariota that it won him a championship. I'm taking full credit.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh, I'm tilting now.
It tells Wonku don't root for the guy I want to root for, the talented guy. I think that's what we taught Wonku. So, hopefully everyone else learns their lessons too, and then you could talk about your trophy how you want it when you get there. So.
Yeah, it'll happen, but
kidding,
just understand that.
Obviously, the Mariota was a big thing. How people kind of like, viewed your fantasy process and stuff, and I do think I don't know what kind of effect it had, but it probably did have some kind of effect. Like it whether it had a positive or negative effect, I don't know. But it like everything just gets involved into your process, and you change how you think about things, and you change. I think the biggest thing for Wonku was a lot of times you would believe in talent when the system or situation was holding a player back a little bit too long. I think.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes
for
the
sure.
system is what's gonna hold a player back. This guy could be really talented, but if he's in a bad system, like he's just in a bad system.
Yep.
But I mean, I think that's a very general like criticism and more of a joke than anything. But it is funny how like you got away from Mariota and you did win the championship. So.
Holding me back. No, but yeah, no, yeah. The point was, it's always a learning process, and again, it's not bad to lose. You can always learn from it. It is painful, of course, in the moment, but keep your cool. You got this. I really do wish the best for you, Ken. Specifically, you, Ken. You better not screw this up, or else you're in a lot of pain soon. But yeah, I think as we close the season, we don't have too many episodes of this left. Hopefully, for next week, my hope is that we get the playoff teams on together to just to talk a little bit between ourselves, and I don't want to ignore.
A lot of congratsing will happen.
I don't want to ignore
congrats.
I don't want to like put away the other teams and ignore them completely. So we'll talk about them, of course, but obviously where the championship is, of course, the main storyline, and so we'll talk a little bit about and yeah, that should be the final show of the season. So yeah, I think that's a wrap. Do you got anything else, Dustin?
No, I mean, yeah, it's been a really good season all year. I know we did criticize some teams and we did praise other teams, but I think pretty much the level of play from overall the whole league has been at a higher level than any in previous
That's what I'm
years.
saying. I
Yeah,
completely agree.
yeah,
Yeah, I completely
yeah.
agree. You guys are all killing it.
Except for Mars.
Except for
Mars is
Mars,
still
yeah.
Mars is lowering the competitiveness. Like he's making these taco moves every week that make me want to pull my hair out. But honestly, everyone else, I do think like we've reached a new high in terms of like how everyone plays this game, and it's really impressive because we changed. We're changing rules on the fly. We're evolving as a league, and people are still making some really insightful moves every week. And I'm blown away by how competitive this league is now every week. And
Me
every
too.
game.
Me too. I think it's amazing. I think it's a lot of fun. You guys are always pushing everyone to the limit, me to the limit. Um, it's just been a great experience. So I hope we keep it up to finish the season strong and into the next couple of seasons as well. So looking forward to it, and we'll see you guys next week.
Yep. Peace.
Peace.